This is bigger than any partisan discussion. This is about the integrity and the strength and equity of our democracy. That's what's under assault. We saw a violent assault on the United States Capitol, and we saw that then metastasize in voter suppression bills all across the country. This is a moment, and we have to stand up. It is the responsibility of Congress to provide baseline federal standards for voting, and I intend to do my job.
Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia, who's leading the Democrats' effort to bring revised voting rights legislation to the floor of the Senate before the summer recess. There's also a similar renewed push in the House, where 35 House Democrats who were all elected in 2018, many of whom are facing tough re-elections, sent a letter to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, calling for a new tailored version of a voting bill to focus on reinstating protections under the Voting Rights Act, while eliminating proposals not directly related to ballot access. And the members of Congress behind this push join us now. Representative Elissa Slotkin of Michigan, Veronica Escobar of Texas, and Colin Allred, also from Texas. And also with us from this conversation is author, poet, and writer-in-residence at Vanderbilt University, Caroline Randall Williams. Good to have you all on board. Elissa Slotkin, I'll start with you. What it is exactly that you would like to be included in the Voting Rights Act to really secure voting for all Americans?
Well, I think we came together as a group of folks who had been freshmen in 2018 who came in on an agenda of reform to say that the most important thing, the most foundational thing we can do is voting rights. And it's time to get serious, to push and create that momentum, and to say to our leadership that we're willing to come back in August whenever they call us back, because it's so fundamental. So that was the point. And, you know, we're open. Of course, we support all the ideals that were in the original H.R. 1, our original reform bill. But voting rights is essential, and we need to start there.
Congresswoman Escobar, there's obviously been a lot of talk about H.R. 1, H.R. 4, and the need to make a good bit of changes to H.R. 1. Have you seen the changes that Joe Manchin has made, and are those the sort of changes that you all are looking at adopting as well?
Good morning. Thanks so much for having us on. We have not yet seen the details from the Senate. We know the general framework, but we also know, more importantly, where the threats are and where they're coming from. In a state like mine, Texas, literally, we are going to lose our democracy through Texas unless we do something. In about a week, the Texas House Democrats that broke quorum in their state legislature and came here to Washington, D.C. to urge us to take action, they are going to have to make a decision. The special session ends for them, and when they fly back, or if they fly back, a new one will begin. There will be extreme gerrymandering. There will be limited access to the ballot box for the disabled, for people of color. And then in about 2 weeks, that's when the extreme gerrymandering begins. So time is of the essence. The clock is running out. And we would like to see a bill and work on a bill and pass a bill in August that addresses what's happening in Texas and other states that will disenfranchise millions of people.
Congressman Susan Del Percio.
Congressman Allred, why not reintroduce H.R. 4 instead of trying to revise H.R. 1, which does have so many extras, if you will, and keep it to the Voting Rights Act? I think a very stripped-down piece of legislation could have a better chance of success. So I'm just curious about the decision there.
We want to do both. We think that H.R. 4 is extremely important. You know, I was a voting rights litigator. I actually litigated under the Voting Rights Act. I want to restore the Voting Rights Act, and you're going to see H.R. 4 moving very quickly in the month of August. But we also recognize that this is a two-pronged strategy. I feel very strongly that we need to have both a sword in terms of the affirmative expansions and national standards of H.R. 1, S1, the modified version that I think Senator Manchin has said he could support, and also the shield of H.R. 4, which will protect us against some of the discriminatory laws that have been passing, but also give us pre-clearance, which is so important, particularly for late changes to election laws. So whether or not these are rolled into one bill eventually, I think it may be a discussion further along the line. But we're going to do both, and I think we should, and I don't think that they are mutually exclusive.
So Georgia Republicans have reportedly begun the process of replacing one of the state's top election officials in a letter obtained by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. 24 state senators reportedly signed off on a performance review of Fulton County Elections Chief Richard Barron. Fulton is Georgia's largest county and played a key role in Joe Biden winning the state last November and Democrats retaking the Senate in January. Under Georgia law, the state election board can replace county officials following a performance review. In their place, a temporary superintendent would have full authority over the county's voting process. Democrats warn the attempt is a scheme to suppress the vote in Georgia. State Republicans have justified the audit by claiming, quote, repeated and systemic election process failures. Despite those claims, multiple recounts have discredited any allegations of voter fraud in the state. So,
Carolyn, there are really two sort of baskets of threats to democracy. And one is making it more difficult for people to vote, especially people of color. And that's the beginning of the process. I think actually even far more dangerous than that are these types of pieces of legislation or these proposals where even after the vote, you have legislatures, Republican legislatures that say, you know what? We're going to just take over the counting of the voting in Georgia, in Texas, in Arizona, maybe up in Michigan. And all of these swing states, Republicans want to take over, fire election officials, and then determine who gets the electoral votes from those states.
Right. And it's sort of this radical act of erasure that is a marked regression that is just reminiscent of, to me, Jim Crow, right? And I'm not remotely the first person to be talking about this, but I think that we should all be frightened by that because it's an active step back from our access to democracy, our access to the tools of suffrage that allow us to move America in the direction that is the will of the people, for example, the outcome of the 2020 election. And I think that this resistance to helping and allowing America to enact the laws that are the will of its people is the danger inherent in those kind of choices is so stark. And I think that, I'm thinking about what happens if these bills don't pass. And I think that maybe we're just facing a moment when it's time to start marching across bridges again. And I think that we're facing a moment when we're looking at a country that doesn't want the will of the people to manifest itself, or the leadership is not enabling the will of the people to manifest itself. And I think we just have to pick up our sword and our shield, as Congressman Allred said, and figure out what we're going to do next. Because I think that there's some machinery that's been activated that is going to require other kinds of activism to navigate.
Congresswoman Slotkin, it's Jonathan Lemire. It's been well defined just now, the threats to democracy, the threats to the ballot. We heard from President Biden a week or so ago. I was there when he gave a fiery speech in Philadelphia saying this is the greatest threat the nation has faced since the Civil War. And we know that he has had a number of meetings with lawmakers, civil rights leaders who have all focused around the same thing, that it has to be a legislative solution. And for that to happen, the filibuster has to go. He, notably, has not called for that yet. So let me just put it to you bluntly. Could President Biden be doing more?
Well, I think, listen, our letter and the point of our letter was to create real momentum and to say, like, we get it. There's a ton of priorities. There's a ton of things. We're all working on infrastructure. We're all caring about the things that mean a lot to our districts. But foundational is voting rights. There is no more important thing than making sure people have free and easy access to the ballots, to the ballot box. So I think it's just to add a little bit of oomph and say that lawmakers are ready to come back and do this. I do think that it is also pushing for a clear strategy. I feel like people are asking me all the time, what is the plan? Like, we're watching this happen in slow motion, and I don't want a year from now for us all to be sort of saying, what more could we do? So we need the sword and the shield. We need federal legislation. And then, as your last guest said, we need organization on the ground, right? We all watched in Georgia what voter registration and voter education did. It's a combination of what we do at the federal level and what people can do on the ground. We need both in order to do what we need to do this year.
Well, Victoria, same question to you. What should Joe Biden do? What should the Biden administration do? Are they taking all the steps that need to be taken right now?
I think that the voice of the president, the vice president, and all of the resources available to the White House could really help continue to build that momentum, but also help get us across the goal line. I know that Joe Manchin cares about voting rights. He has talked about it. And so now is the time to act with urgency and to realize that we are about to go off a cliff that will be very hard to come back from. And as Alyssa mentioned, we cannot watch our democracy be taken from us and the voices of some of the most vulnerable, people of color, the disabled, just completely silenced as we try to face some major challenges going forward.